Topic 1. Rising geopolitical tensions over Iran. Summary. Rapid escalation of Middle East tensions after U.S. and Israeli military actions against Iran risks wider military confrontation and severe global economic shock. The U.S. has sent thousands more troops and is preparing options that could include securing strategic choke points. Iran has rejected most ceasefire proposals and is pressing for control over the Strait of Hormuz. Gulf states are asserting their right to self-defense. Analysts warn of major energy and trade disruptions, and markets face mounting risk of prolonged economic fallout. Detailed report. Background and overall situation. Tensions in the Middle East have surged sharply following U.S. and Israeli actions against Iran, delivering a severe shock to Europe and the global economy. At the G7 foreign ministers meeting, allies voiced concern over U.S. moves and urged searching for an off-ramp. U.S. troop increases and military options. The United States has deployed thousands of additional troops to the region and is reported to be preparing rapid military options, including resecuring the Strait of Hormuz or seizing strategic facilities such as Karg Island. These moves raise the risk of military escalation. Peace and ceasefire proposals and Iran's response. The White House says it conveyed a mediation plan, reported as proposed by President Trump, but Iran has officially rejected negotiations and dismissed most U.S. proposals, instead offering alternatives that include 5 demands tied to control of the strait. G7 and European warnings and distancing. European leaders, including Germany and the EU, warned this conflict could be a catastrophe for the world economy and reiterated they do not intend to join the war. The G7 is expected to press the U.S. for diplomatic solutions. Gulf states' posture and self-defense preparations. Gulf countries, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, and Jordan, condemned attacks on energy infrastructure and repeatedly affirmed their right to self-defense. They also highlighted Iran-aligned armed groups in Iraq as a problem and left open the possibility of military responses. Strait of Hormuz and transit toll plans. Reports say Iran is preparing legislation to impose transit tolls on passage through the Strait of Hormuz. Gulf oil producers and international analysts view such moves as unacceptable and warn that any effective blockade would be catastrophic for maritime trade and energy supplies. Economic fallout. Major damage has already been reported to refining and LNG facilities, estimates of about 30 to 40% of refining capacity destroyed, and some reports of 17% losses in gas production. Oil and energy supply disruptions have driven prices sharply higher, inflicting wide damage on economies and vulnerable countries. Analysts warn that if the conflict persists, global inflation and growth shocks would deepen. Key risk factors: military reinforcements and hardline responses, Iran's rejection of negotiations and attempt to control Hormuz, Gulf states' preparations for self-defense, and the linkage of all these developments to energy supply disruptions and a global economic shock. Topic 2. Oil backwardation, Treasury and gold moves, Asia-Pacific markets, EPA waivers, and consumer price warnings. Summary: oil futures are in backwardation, reflecting a short-term supply shock and risk premium even as the market expects the spike to ease later in the year. U.S. Treasury yields and gold have moved as investors reprice geopolitical and economic risk. Asia-Pacific markets are being watched for vulnerability to energy supply disruptions. EPA temporary fuel waivers and retailer warnings may ease pump prices short-term, but also carry environmental and food price trade-offs, and consumer inflation risks remain high. Detailed report. Oil backwardation. Near-month futures prices exceed longer-dated contracts, signaling a short-term supply shock and elevated risk premiums. Traded Brent futures are around $99 per barrel and WTI near 87.8, rough,